So tonight, I'm only up here for a little while. They're only letting me up here for a little while. I'm a bit of a loose cannon, so. All right, so I'm going to start off with a story. So when I was in year 8, so like same age as the boys I lead, so like 13, 14 years old, like I wasn't the best kid at school, but I remember one day it was like winter like now, so it was really cold. And I remember, I think it was a Wednesday, so the Tuesday night before it had this massive storm and it hailed, but like because it was so cold, the sort of hail was still there in the morning, and we were like, what? Because I went to school in like Western Sydney. It's like always really hot. We're like, what? Ice? This is like America. So we just started like, me and the boys started just throwing it at each other. And I remember we went to this part, I was like, let's go to this part of the school because none of the teachers were there and we didn't want to get in trouble. So we started throwing the ice at each other and we were having a great time. And my mate Ben, this Ranger guy, he's like, all right, yeah. He's like, all right, so he threw it and it hit me in the rib. And I was like, oh, like it was painful. Like, I don't know, it felt like I broke my rib or something. And anyway, I was like, that's it, mate. Like, I'm going to get you back. So I got the ice and I was like, all right. And I threw it without looking and I threw it at Ben, but it wasn't Ben. You wouldn't believe this. It was literally like, not like the janitor, not the teachers, not anyone. It was the actual principal of the school. And he's like, all right, like he like was a 50-year-old dude, right? So he's like, he's not fit, and he's like, oh, and it hit him in the rib as well. So he's like, oh, like he was like on one knee as well, and I was like, oh gosh. And he's like, he knew me by the first name at that point, and I was like, oh. And so he looked at me and he goes, Chris, that's it, you're in trouble. Go to my office. And so I don't know if you guys have ever gotten into trouble at school or with your parents. You probably have, like everyone has. Like that feeling like someone just like rips your like inside out, and you're just like, oh. And so I was walking to his office, and he made me wait for like a full hour at his office, and I think he entered through the back because like he didn't want to see me, and then his like secretary was like, all right, Chris, time to go in. Like they knew me by the first name, and I walked in, and he's in the office on his side with like another, like an ice pack, like a proper ice pack, really turning it up for me, and I was like, all right, like here, I'm going to cop it now. Like he's putting the ice pack on, like it's just it. Like I thought I was going to get expelled or something, and he's like, you know what, Chris, like I've got a lot to do today, right? But like, and I could suspend you, I could give you detention, I could give you whatever I want because you probably deserve it. But he's like, I'm feeling gracious, I'm feeling good. So how about you just don't throw ice at anyone, I don't throw ice at anyone, and I don't suspend you. And he let me go. Like he just showed me grace in that. And I guess like, what's the point of that to tonight's study? So tonight we're going to be doing 2 Corinthians chapter 12. And in that, Paul, he gets like a thorn in his side and he's pleading to God, and God says to him in verse 9, he says, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. So God's grace is sufficient for you. What does that mean? Like, what's God's grace sufficient for? And I have a few points. I don't have all of them because I don't have a lot of time. So firstly, God's grace is sufficient for us to survive pain. So to survive pain. In this, Paul had a thorn in his side, and we all have pain in our lives. We have emotional pain, we have mental pain, we have physical pain. And God's grace on its own is enough for us to survive through that, however long that lasts. Could be a day, could be a week, could be a year, we don't know. So God's grace is enough for us to survive pain. Secondly, to empower us for ministry. So God's plan for our lives is accomplished purely on his approval alone. So often everyone looks to other people, or they look to themselves and their own power to do the ministry, but you don't need to. God's grace is enough on its own for us to do the ministry and for it to thrive. And thirdly, is for our security. So I know we all wonder. I wonder if I'm loved, if I'm appreciated, if I'm accepted. If people want to be around me. But we so often again look to other people. We look to popularity. We look to our jobs and money and everything, sport, whatever, for our security. But really, God wants us to look purely to him for our security, and that's all we need. So, firstly, to survive pain. Secondly, to empower us for ministry. And thirdly, for our security. And what I'm trying to tell you here is that pretty much God's grace is sufficient for our whole lives. Our whole lives. So, just like in my story, how I was talking about my principle, give me grace when I don't deserve it, God gives us grace when we don't deserve it. So let me pray. Dear Lord, thank you for tonight. Thank you for the youth band, and thank you for everything that provides. And Lord, I pray that tonight we go out into our pods and we learn more about this thing that we call God's grace. And I pray that we have fun and games and we're safe, and all that great stuff. I pray this in your name. Amen.